Hello. Hello, hello. Hello. It is evening here. How are you all doing? How is everybody today? Let me turn my background music down a bit. I think it's a little bit oppressive. There we go. Cool. How are we all doing today? I hope we're all doing good. So I have been thinking, I have been planning to do some science streaming. That was the whole point of this Twitch channel, was to actually, stream some science, teach people psychology. And then I realised I haven't actually done that yet, which is a bit. Oh, hello. Oh, was the stream not working properly? Oh dear. It seems like it is working now, though. That's good. I've just noticed my chat isn't working either. That's a bit strange. Let me try turning it off and on again. It was buffering. Oh, strange. Very odd. Right, I wonder if that's going to work now. Hopefully it will. If not, it's okay. It's okay. Even if it doesn't work, it's okay. Because today we're going to be reading through a paper. So I thought, what is the best way for me to teach some psychology without actually doing any prep? And I thought reading through a paper together might be the best way to do it. Psychology papers can be a little bit scary to look at in the first instance, but I think I should be able to walk you through it okay. So the paper we're going to be reading about is a Nature paper. So Nature is one of the top journals, or in theory anyway. There's a whole thing about how we classify journals and what they mean. But a journal is where scientists publish their research. So it's basically just a fancy magazine, to be honest, except it's mostly online now. And it is peer reviewed, which means that other scientists also have a look at what you've done, and they go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that it actually all makes sense. The paper we're going to be reading today is in Nature Human Behavior, which is considered one of the more prestigious journals. It's, if you can get your psychology published in Nature Human Behavior, you're doing pretty good, your career is in science is going pretty well. So yeah, that's the plan. Let me just try and get the chat working, because this is upsetting me that I can't see what is happening. One day there will be a Psydere stream without any tech issues, but that day is not today. Let's see, if I just copy it, I wonder if it'll work. Copy. It still isn't working. Okay, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, we'll have to work without the chat today. I can still see what you're saying. It won't appear in the VOD, which is a bit sad. But yeah, I'll make sure I read out all of the comments in the chat. Yeah, it does. It just happens sometimes. Technology do be like that. I'm so upset because I actually thought I'd managed to check everything properly today, and then yeah, it still doesn't work. But yeah, one day we'll get there where I don't have tech issues. But yeah, clearly not today. Okay, so I am going to... What should we do? Should we do the game overlay? Maybe that makes the most sense. How are we all doing this evening? It is evening here. Very much evening. In fact, this is actually very late. It's starting to get towards my bedtime. So, yeah. Hopefully we can get this get this paper read through fairly quickly, because I don't want to be spending hours upon hours reading dense science in my evening. I've also still got a lot of marking to do. You're doing good watching the Euro games. I didn't even realise there was Euro games on at the minute. it appears that my game capture is also not working. What did I do to deserve this? Oh no. Okay, I might actually just have to restart the stream. Would that be okay with everybody? Gotta see who qualifies between Ukraine or Italy. Yes. I don't know any football things, so I assume this is the Euros as in football. But yeah, I'm gonna restart the stream. We'll try again. It will go well this time. At least I get a mildly amusing short VOD out of it, I guess. of me just having permanent tech issues. So yeah, let's try again. See you in a minute. Hello, we are back in business. We are back in business. Things are working, at least I think. And we will get through this paper because I can already tell this is a cursed paper. Yeah. Hi. Welcome back. For anybody who has just joined the stream, I just had to restart because I was having terrible tech issues. It was horribly embarrassing. I am meant to be a professional scientist, and apparently I can't even work basic software. So there you go. If that isn't a slightly disturbing reflection on the state of modern research, then I don't know what is. Yeah. But we're back. It's working, I think. It seems to be working from what I can tell. And this time, for realsies, we are going to work through a psychology paper. So, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by tech issues, we are going to be working through a paper which was published in Nature Human Behavior. Nature Human Behavior is considered one of the best journals in psychology. So the way that scientific research works is that you do your research and then you go away with your findings, you write them up into a nice little report, and you put them in a journal, which is basically just a fancy publication outlet for scientists. It lets them, get their stuff out there. Lets them show their work to other scientists. So, with that in mind, we are going to be reading through a paper. So when I say a paper, I just mean a journal article. We kind of short form it to paper because it's just a bit easier to say. Oh no, sorry. I did try and send out a new notification, but I think it might have tried to like overwrite it with the previous one or something like that. But yeah, we're back, and I think I've managed to get things working. So yeah. So I'm just going to take a quick drink of tea. We are so back. Okay, we are back and we are excited to read some psychology research. So this one that I'm going to be showing you all, actually, let me just bring it up. There we go. Look at that, a paper. So yeah, this is what a paper looks like. It is just a fancy formatted PDF with graphs and words and numbers. And a lot of people are absolutely terrified the first time they see these. Oh yes, there's also a long old list of references at the end. I'm going to walk through the paper. Bearing in mind, this is the first time that I have read this. I literally just read the title and I was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. So we're going to walk through it together. And we will find something interesting in it, hopefully. Oh, I came here for the anime. Yeah, there's no anime today. There is only cold hard facts. Yeah, hopefully I can make this interesting because, I don't want it to be scaring anybody off. This is a big part of my work is just reading. It's just reading and, trying to work out what all of these words mean. So, high replicability of newly discovered social behavioural findings is achievable. That's a lot of words. What does it mean? So, without having actually read the paper, which, this is the normal way that you kind of find a paper, is that you don't necessarily read it. You just see the title and you're like, yeah, that sounds vaguely interesting. I might want to read that. And then you start reading it. But yeah, based on the title, I am assuming that this is telling us about whether psychological findings, so the results from psychological science, like experiments, can be replicated, which means whether if you repeat them again, they kind of produce the same results. Even if you're doing it with a different set of people, you do exactly the same method, and you see whether it produces the same results. Because if it produces the same results over and over again with different groups of people, then you can say, okay, this says something about humans as a group, right? But if it is instead, it has different results across different groups, then you can start to think, okay, maybe this is just kind of something that happens in a certain culture. Maybe it is something that happens at a certain time, or maybe it is just something wacky and we don't know what's going on. There's also some findings that can just happen by accident. So there's in any psychology experiment, depending on how you set up your experiment, there's about a 5% chance that you will just find what you're looking for when it doesn't exist. So that's just purely like a fact of statistics. Like, it's just a fact of how random the universe is. Things just happen for some reason, and they just occur. It's just a spontaneous thing. It happens sometimes. But it does mean that we have to try and work out the difference between an actual fact about how people work and a random occurrence that shouldn't have happened. I'm going to be taking probably a fair few tea sips because my throat kind of hurts. I still have that ongoing cold that I have had for like the last 2 weeks. So yeah, if I just suddenly disappear for a few seconds, that's what I'm doing. But yeah, so the first thing that you see in any psychology paper is the title, the journal name. But you also see this kind of like this string of numbers here. So every... Hi Jack. We're just walking through a paper today, like a psychology paper. So this string of numbers up here, every single paper has a unique set of numbers like this. It's called a digital object identifier, DOI. And it means that you can basically tell apart all of the studies just from this string of numbers. Now, that might seem really unhelpful and really random, but if you have got a massive library of literally hundreds, even thousands of papers that you're using for your research, you need to be able to just like have one set consistent link to each of them. So that's what these are for. It means that every paper that gets published has just a doi.org/ blah 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 URL. So I guess it's kind of like a link shortener, because the links to the actual journal articles are always really, really long. And then next you've got information about when it was published. So you'll see here it says received, it says accepted, and it says published online. So basically, science papers don't get published as soon as they're received, because they are all peer-reviewed. They are checked over by other scientists with expertise in the area. And because of that, there can be a little bit of a delay between getting the paper in at the desk of the editor of the journal and actually accepting it. So saying, yes, this is something that we are willing to publish and that we want to publish. So you can see here there was a bit of a gap of a few months. That's actually fairly quick. Sometimes they can take years. It really just depends on the individual journal. And then it also takes a little bit of time to get it published online, because normally you just send it in as like a Word document type of thing, and then the journal goes through and edits it for you so that it looks all nice and fancy like this one does. The next thing that you're going to see on any journal article is just the list of people that were involved in the paper. So all of these people here were somehow involved in either doing the research or writing it up or making the graphs or thinking about how they were going to implement certain methodologies. So methodologies is just like the way that you do the experiment, basically. And all of these people were involved. So this is a fairly big team, I think it's fair to say. You can get different types of scientific collaborations. You can get some of them, especially in psychology, they tend to be kind of smaller groups of people. So it might be like 2, 3, 4, 5 people working on a paper together. They should all have something to do with the research, but not always. Not always, but that's maybe a topic for another day. Yeah, and then all of these people have got these little numbers, so that corresponds with where they do their research. So you can see the first author here. So the first author is kind of the person that gets the majority of the credit, to be honest. If you're talking about a paper, so yeah, for example, this one, if we're talking about this one, we'd probably say Protzko and colleagues. Because it's just a shorthand way of like referring to the paper. Because otherwise, if you're sitting here and you're like John Protzko, John Krosnick, Leif Nielsen, etc., it goes on and on and on. Especially if you've got a really big collaboration. If you think about things like CERN, there's like thousands upon thousands of people that work on those experiments. It's not as common for that to happen in psychology, but it's starting to happen a little bit. So yeah, once it gets to the point of like more than 5, you start to get really tired listing off all the names. Although it's kind of rubbish because all of these people just become and colleagues, which is like their work is kind of being distilled into a pretty short set of words, which is a bit sad. But it is what it is. Yeah, everybody gets at least one first author paper, hopefully. So hopefully they will get their time. And then this bit here is called the abstract. So this is just basically a summary of the whole paper. It's condensing the entire paper, so all of the research, what they found, and all of their conclusions into about 200 words. Depending how often you write, 200 words might sound like a lot, but for me, like that's nothing. I'm currently in the process of writing an 80,000 word thesis, so 200 is really not much. But yeah, the 200 words, it's actually really hard to kind of think about this massive set of experiments that you've done and try and squish it all down. 80,000, yeah, 80,000. It's pretty intense, and that's just the actual writing. Like there's extra stuff I have to do, which probably totals another about 20,000 words. Godspeed to your keyboard. I think I'm gonna need a new one, to be honest. I think I will need a new one after all of this is done. But yeah, thankfully there's no 80,000 words in this paper. As far as I can tell, it's only 12 pages long, which is fairly short for a paper. That's why I chose it. So I'm gonna set up my highlight. What color should we highlight? I think we should highlight in red. If there's any opinions about changing the color, I will consider it, but I can't guarantee it. Is 12 not a lot? It really is not, no. I think, out of the papers that I read, I think the average is normally maybe 25. Sometimes they can be 50 pages long. It's really variable. But Nature Human Behavior, this journal, is really, they're really big on condensing it down as much as possible. But it does normally mean that they can't actually fit all of the information about the experiment into the paper. So they'll have something called supplementary information where they just dump everything that they couldn't fit. I barely study 12 pages word by word over the span of a week. Yeah, I think that, to be fair, this is a very big part of my job, so I'm a pretty fast reader now. So you'll probably, I don't know, once I actually get into reading this, you'll probably see how quickly I skim through things. But yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skim read it, and I'm going to try and draw your attention to things that I think are interesting. And I'm also going to try and talk about the things that are interesting while skim reading the things. Because if I was smart, I would have like pre-prepared and, like thought about maybe annotating it in advance, but I did not. We like chaos in these streams. So yeah, I'm just going with the flow and we'll see what happens. Yeah. Okay, so, right, the abstract. So, failures to replicate evidence of new discoveries have forced scientists to ask whether this unreliability is due to suboptimal implementation of methods or whether presumptive optimal methods are not, in fact, optimal. So this is just basically saying there have been some issues with trying to replicate our studies, so trying to get the experiment to run over and over and over again and get the same results each time. And that means that we're starting to question, are we doing science right? Like, are we doing this the right way? So this paper reports an investigation by 4 coordinated laboratories in the prospective this is the point where everybody finds out I can't actually read. Prospective replicability of 16 novel experimental findings using rigor-enhancing practices. So that basically just means there's a whole bunch of scientists that got together. There are 4 different labs. So that means a lab is just like a group. Well, it's short for laboratory. But in psychology, we don't always have actual physical laboratories. We sometimes just kind of form a group of our mates and say it's a lab. Yeah. So there's 4 labs that have come together. They all work on similar topics, and they've thought, okay, let's test some things and see whether this process that we're using actually works, and whether new ways of doing science kind of make things a bit more consistent. 16 minutes in and the English has failed. Hey, to be fair, we are actually 30 minutes in because I tried to stream and I had horrible technical difficulties and it all went wrong. So cut me a bit of slack. This is going very well. It's going very well. And I'm in the science and technology category today, so there's a chance that an actual scientist will come along and be like, what is she doing? Like, what even is this? Okay. So the rigor-enhancing practices that they used are confirmatory tests, large sample sizes, pre-registration, and methodological transparency. That's a lot of fancy words, isn't it? But it's actually fairly simple. So, confirmatory tests. That is just a specific kind of statistical method that we use on the data that we've generated. And that's it. That's all it is. It's just a specific type of statistical analysis. Large sample sizes. So that literally just means that we are performing our experiment on a big group of people, as in like thousands. Thousands are ideal, because the more people that you have in your sample, the less likely you are to generate findings that they're not consistent across groups. Because if you've got a really big sample, then chances are you've got a fair number of groups in there, right? Pre-registration. So pre-registration is when you basically declare in advance what you're going to do. So you sit there and you write out a little thingy that says, hey, I'm Psydere. I want to run this experiment about I'm testing anime fans. I'm gonna test anime fans. I'm gonna put them in a room and then I'm gonna make them interact with somebody who is or isn't an anime fan. And then this is how I'm gonna analyze it. These are the statistics I'll use. And that's all pre-registration is. It's just declaring those things up front so that you can't go away and faff around with things and cause problems. Oh, thank you for the follow, Jubus. Thank you. Welcome, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the talk through the paper. I shall cut you the slack. Would you like me to cut you an apple too? You know, snacks are really good when you're studying, so that would be nice. Fancy words. They are actually very simple. Did not have to call us out like that. No, honestly, one of the things that really annoys me about scientists is that we have this tendency to just use jargon that just isn't needed. We just don't need to do it. We just use these words to make ourselves feel smart, and the reality is that scientists are people like me. Like we're just normal. Let's put it that way. We're just normal. But yeah, it's not needed. I think people would trust science a lot more if we didn't use these kinds of words to make people feel alienated from it. Although, funnily enough, as I was talking, I've just realised alienated is also a kind of a fancy word. So I'm not really practicing what I preach, am I? Okay, right, back to the paper. So, in contrast to past systematic replication efforts that reported replication rates averaging 50%, replication attempts here produced the expected effects with significance testing in 86% of attempts, slightly exceeding the maximum expected replicability based on observed effect sizes and sample sizes. They really like to make their sentences long and difficult to pronounce. So, remember when I said that sometimes psychology, we run experiments and it doesn't do what we expect it to do always. Sometimes it will not repeat. So we will not be able to repeat the experiment and find the same results. So that's what it's referring to. There were some studies that came out, I think kind of around 2013 time, which showed that there was about, if you were going to repeat a study like that, you were going to replicate it, then you would have about a 50% chance of it showing the same results and about a 50% chance of it showing something totally different, which is not ideal because for us to be doing proper science, we kind of just want it to be like closer to 100. Like we kind of want to be doing science the right way the first time. And if we're finding consistent patterns, then we should be seeing it all the time. We shouldn't be just randomly finding some things replicate and some things don't. So yeah, those original studies found that, but the way that science is done, especially in psychology, has totally changed in the last kind of 10 years. It's shifted much more towards being really careful about how we plan out our studies. And it's also shifted a lot more to using systems that stop us from doing research in a way that isn't best for finding consistent results. So what that means is that the average rate of replication has gone up from 50 to 86%, which is a good thing. It means that the way that we're doing science is genuinely improving. It also means that we're not all the way there yet because we use this p less than 0.05 cutoff. So that is literally just we expect about a 5% chance that we're going to find something when it doesn't exist. So ideally we need this 86 number to be, we need it to be 95, but it is not there yet. So yeah, we've still got some work to go. My engineer brain does not compute with your fancy science. Honestly, my science brain doesn't compute with my fancy science. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so when one lab attempted to replicate an effect discovered by another lab, the effect size in the replication was 97%, that in the original study. So what is an effect size? An effect size is basically a number that we use to kind of understand how big the effect is that we're looking at. So if we're taking that example again of putting an anime fan in a room and then introducing them to another anime fan or somebody that doesn't like anime, and then we're expecting there to be a difference in how they interact, let's say just how friendly they are, then we would describe the difference between those two experimental conditions as being the effect size. So if one group, let's say if there was two anime fans together and they interact for 50% more time than in the other group, then we would say that the effect size is 50% bigger. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I really hope that this makes sense, because if this doesn't make sense, then I've been teaching my students really, really badly. Yeah. And this, oh, you're loving this? Oh, amazing. Wait, so like two groups. Yeah, so the way that we think about psychological experiments is that we tend to just randomly put people in one group or another. I think this will make a lot more sense when I've actually done my introduction to psychology lecture, because this is going to be the types of things that I cover. But yeah, so we put loads of people randomly into one of two groups or one of two conditions. And that just means that one group of people gets to hang out with an anime fan and the other group doesn't. So yeah, we call them different groups or different conditions. But to be honest, the word groups is very broad. We can use it in terms of pretty much any social group. So you might see psychologists referring to intergroup processes, which just refers to different social groups. So, for example, if you're thinking of, let's see. So, for example, if you've got different national groups, let's say we've got different national groups. We've got English people and we've got French people. English people and French people historically do not like each other. And that would be considered an intergroup relation. There's a bad intergroup relation there. They don't like each other. No, please. I like the questions. I hope that I can try and answer them. Are the groups made of anime fans or non-anime fans? Yeah, so in this example that we're making up, there would be a group of they're both anime fans, but they're put into different groups in the experiment. And so there's the anime fans who are put into the anime fan condition, which means that they are talking to another anime fan. And then there's the anime fans that are put into the non-anime fan condition, which means that they are talking to non-fans, like people that don't like anime. So yeah, it's just a kind of artificial way of dividing people up into experiments. And we're trying to we put people in randomly because we want to kind of control for all of the external influences that might manipulate or have an effect on the experiment. If you do it randomly, then generally things even out. So we want to try and make sure that we're only changing one thing. If you think about like physics experiments, you do the same thing, right? You just change temperature or you just change, I don't know, what else do they do in physics? Light, let's say light. So you just change different levels of light, for example, and then you see how that affects different levels of heat. And we're doing the same thing, but people are a lot more complicated. So we have to try and cut a few corners and kind of artificially create experimental conditions when they might not exist. Density, mass, force, of course. It's been a long time since I did my physics A level, so so yeah. Yeah. When you're on the spot, you forget everything, honestly. But yeah. So that's a kind of rough introduction to how psychology experiments tend to work. And also about replication. So we can now go through this paper and try and understand some of it. And before we do that, I'm going to have a quick sip of my tea. Okay, so the way that papers tend to be structured after this introductory bit with the information about publishing, the title, the authors, and the abstract, you'll jump straight into the introduction section. Now, the whole point of the introduction section is to kind of give you a broad overview of the thing that the paper is about. So in this case, the paper is about replication rates. So the introduction is going to be giving us a bit of background about why replication rates are important, how they've changed over time. You can see here they've listed some examples of things that haven't always replicated. I think that's what this is. Oh, okay, no, those are the ones that are included in. Okay, cool, that's fine. So yeah, this is just an example of some of the effects that they're looking at. And then, because this is a Nature paper, they do things in the wrong order. What's meant to come after the introduction is the methodology, but for some reason in Nature papers they put it at the bottom. So the methodology is telling us how they actually conducted the research, what they did. And to be honest, I think this is probably one of the more important bits of a paper. I mean, they're all important in their own way, but this is the bit that you need to look at to really understand what they were doing and why they did it. So it will tell you things like the people that they decided to recruit for the experiment, and it will tell you about what they actually did. There should be a kind of step-by-step guide to doing it. And then that is followed on by the results. So this is just a whole bunch of statistical tests. Normally you get some lovely little graphs in here, and there should be the occasional explanation for what all of these numbers mean, but not always. And then once you're done with that, you get to the discussion. So if you struggle with numbers, with statistics, I would always suggest for people to go to the discussion first, read through it so you understand what they think they found, and then go through and have a look at the numbers and see if they match up to the best of your ability. Obviously, you know, different people have different strengths. My strengths aren't necessarily the numbers. My strengths are more in the writing bit. But you know, other people are very good at statistics, and they can go through and find out whether they actually match up. This looks like chemistry. They look very familiar. Pretty sure I've read articles with a similar format, but about diseases and stuff. Yeah, so Nature is like a group of publishers. Nature is a single publisher, but they have a group of journals. So they've got the main kind of Nature journal, which mostly does genetics. They do ecology. They publish a lot of astronomy and astrophysics. So yeah, mostly it's kind of like what would be considered hard STEM. I think psychology is STEM. But yeah, they publish all sorts of scientific papers. And yeah, they all use the same formatting. So you probably have seen a chemistry paper that looks exactly like this. You thought this was a French lesson. How dare you? Actually, how dare you? I am offended that you would even suggest that this could be a French lesson. Honestly. Shaking my head. If you struggle already there. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to the numbers. I teach statistics as part of my job, and honestly, students will sometimes ask me questions, and I'm like, I wish I knew the answer, but I don't. We're gonna Google it together, and we Google it together, and normally it works out okay. Oh, I'm not gonna read out French. I'm not doing it. Okay, right. So the introduction. Science progressively learns about the world through the discovery of replicable findings. Efforts to systematically replicate studies across various scientific fields have reported seemingly disappointing replication rates ranging from 30% to 70%, with effect sizes about half of the size of original findings. Oh, more fancy words. What do we think it means? Do we have any ideas in the chat as to what that sentence might mean? Because I know what it means, but I want to see if any of you know what it means. After I've given you my nice little primer, let's see if you're actually learning. Yeah. No clue. Okay, fair enough. 45. That is the answer to everything. The universe, meaning of life, everything. So that is fair enough. Okay, so what it means is that there's obviously different fields. Oh yeah, 42. You're right. Wow. I've just, I've had another small brain moment. You know what? I think that brains, with the wrinkles, they're so ugly. I think we should just move to smooth brains. The wrinkles don't do anything anyway. I'm saying this as a psychologist. Officially, the wrinkles do nothing. They're pointless. Let's all just embrace the smooth. How did the teacher waiting for this moment in IRL? Well, you've had it here, so I think that's better. Okay, right. You having a small brain moment? How do you think I feel? Honestly, I am having a small brain moment all the time. I'm just gonna put it down to the fact it's late. You know, I am an aging lady. I need my beauty sleep, and I don't function very well. So I'm just gonna put it down to that. Okay, so what this means is so there's different types of fields. Oh, there we go. I take it to mean that 30 to 70% of attempts to replicate scientific studies have found about half. Oh my gosh, it's getting late and I can't do it. Have found results about half the size of the original. Yes, dead on. That's exactly what it means. So yeah, it means that, yeah, psychology is just, we're not doing so great in general. It's tired, I'm late, yeah, mood. Psychology, we're not doing so great in general. For a long time, we have just been really, really struggling. And there has been so many papers come out saying like, you suck. Psychology, you suck. What are you doing? So yeah, we're trying to improve things, and that is the whole point of this paper, right? We're seeing whether we can improve things and whether it actually works to improve things if we get better results. So, seemingly low replicability can be the consequence of false positives or exaggerated effect sizes among the original studies, resulting from low statistical power, measurement problems, errors, p-hacking, and regression to the mean due to selective reporting favouring original positive results. Now, that is a whole bunch of things which we're not going to get into today. But what I will say is that historically, science hasn't necessarily favoured doing good science. So what do I mean by that? The system that scientists work in is very numbers orientated. So universities are really looking for things like, how many papers are you publishing? How many people are referencing your research? So how many citations do you get on your paper? How many grants are you getting? How many like charitable foundations and government organizations are giving you money to keep getting your research done? These are all things which really have pushed people to churn out a lot of papers rather than necessarily focusing on doing good papers. And unfortunately, the science has kind of gone with it. There's been a bit of a tendency, especially in psychology, where we can churn out like surveys and kind of mishmash ad hoc experiments very, very quickly. So and if you get a data set and then you find that you weren't able to get the finding that you wanted, you can just kind of do some different statistics on it and you'll probably find something, even if it's not what you were looking for. Now, a lot of the time, that's just, remember I said earlier, sometimes things just happen randomly. It just happens due to chance. It just happens. It's just random. But yeah, it just keeps going. It just keeps churning. And scientists will keep using their old data sets and doing new analyses on it, even if they really shouldn't. And they will write new papers from it. And all of this has come together and is the reason why psychology doesn't replicate very well. I generally follow the falsification method. A lot of bad science is performed forgetting that. Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone that doesn't know, the falsification method is the idea that instead of like trying to go out and do science to prove something, to find an effect that we want and to prove that it exists, we should kind of be doing it the other way around. We should assume that things don't exist, and we should design our experiments in a way that ensures that we can prove that they don't exist. Because if the experiment then doesn't get the finding that we were expecting, then it means it probably does exist. And it's a lot easier to build up layers of evidence that way. So yeah, it's definitely, it's the main way that we should be doing it really, but unfortunately a lot of scientists don't actually read much philosophy of science. which is just like a whole field about do science in a way that how can I describe philosophy of science? So philosophy is just like thinking about the world, right? It's kind of like reasoning about the world. And philosophy of science focuses specifically on reasoning about how we do science. So how do we generate knowledge? And yeah, it should be a foundation for scientists, but unfortunately it isn't, because there's often just not the time to be teaching. More like instead of trying to prove my idea right, I try to prove it wrong to the best of my ability until no possibility exists for it to be true. Absolutely. That's a much better way of describing it than I just said. Yeah. I've been saying earlier, I don't know if you've just joined us fairly recently, but I'm very tired. It's very late. I've been marking papers for literally the last week and a half, and I'm losing my mind. So you are absolutely more than welcome to fact check me. If I say something that's a bit off, please do call me out, and I will absolutely correct myself. And thank you, because actually that's such a valuable contribution. So thank you. Okay, right. So back to the paper. I've been waffling for I don't even know how long so far, and we've read the first 2 sentences. Okay. So low replicability can also be the consequence of false negatives or suppressed effect sizes among replication studies, resulting from sampling error, low statistical power, heterogeneity of the phenomena, different analytic strategies, questionable research practices, and/or lack of fidelity to the original protocols. Oh, there's so much jargon in this paper. I'm starting to think this wasn't a good paper for the first journal club. Oh, this is what I get for not reading it beforehand. So this is just saying that when we're trying to replicate results, it's not just bad science. So the questionable research practices, that is the things like doing dodgy statistics and trying to churn out a whole buttload of papers from it. That is questionable research practices. But everything else is kind of just stuff that happens. So for example, different analytic strategies, what that's referring to is just the way that different scientists will run their analyses, just purely down to how they've been trained or just the norms in their field, things like that. Because there is a whole bunch of diversity around that. Some people learn to do so. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to give an example because it's going to get too technical, and I don't want to do that at this time of night. But yeah, let's just say that different scientists learn to run their analyses in different ways, and they use different methods, and they understand the numbers in different ways, just slightly different, but different enough for it to sometimes have an impact. And yeah, that just means that sometimes things seem to replicate when they shouldn't, or seem to not replicate when they should. Okay, I'm going to have a sip of tea. Okay, right. So, this is just kind of highlighting the fact that, sometimes things don't replicate just purely because of people are diverse, and scientists are fairly diverse too. And sometimes people they're doing things in different ways, and that's okay. It just happens sometimes. Finally, failures to replicate or declining effect sizes can be the consequence of unknown or unarticulated moderating influences and boundary conditions that differ between the original and replication studies, indicating shortcoming in the theoretical and methodological specifications. Wow. They are really going heavy on the jargon, aren't they? Oh, you have returned with food. Nice, nice. We love that. I've got a donut waiting for me after the stream's over. I think the things that I want to highlight here are moderating influences and boundary conditions. So a moderating influence is some kind of external variable, external thing that affects the relationship that you're looking at. So remember we said about we're looking at how anime fans interact with non-anime fans, or how anime fans interact with fellow anime fans. So in theory, we want that to just be a direct relationship. We just want to see if the specific variable of whether the partner is an anime fan or not has an effect on how much they interact. A moderating influence is something extra that comes in on top of that and messes up the relationship in some way that we don't necessarily understand. So, for example, we might have a moderating effect of gender, where let's say that in this hypothetical example, let's say that women, if they're interacting with somebody, it doesn't matter whether they're an anime fan or not, whereas for men, it does. So that would be a moderating factor. That's something that we haven't considered in our initial design. We thought it would be just, fine. We thought it would just the randomization into the groups would just work. It would just account for it. But maybe the way that the randomization has ended up is that one group has slightly more men and one group has slightly more women. Well, then in that case, the gender is becoming a moderating influence. So it's having an effect on the relationship that we might not be aware of unless we measure it. And then boundary conditions they're kind of like, how can I describe this? They're kind of, so we have these ideas about, we have a theory. We have a theory about how anime fans interact. And we have some kind of threshold. Or we have some kind of limit to what we think our theory can explain. So that's basically what a boundary condition is. It's really important when we're doing science to work out the boundary conditions in our theory, because that's telling us where the theory stops being relevant, where we can stop applying it. And it also tells us the limitations that we might see in our methodology. So yeah. These are two really important things to think about when we're doing any kind of science. A boundary condition, it could be the difference between seeing an effect and not, because we thought it would apply across different countries, for example, and then we thought we'd see the same pattern across countries, and then it turns out that actually the way that anime fans and non-anime fans interact in the UK is very, very different to how they interact in other parts of the world. So yeah, all of these are things that can affect how our results are. Oh, my brain just 404'd. All of these are things that affect whether our effects appear and whether they are the same size when we try and replicate them. Okay, so I think that the introduction is just going to be saying a lot more of this. So yeah, all of these things together explain why effect sizes seem to be shrinking sometimes when we replicate, and also why sometimes we just cannot replicate things full stop. So, in this article, we report the results of a prospective replication study, examining whether low replicability and declining effect sizes are inevitable when using proposed rigor-enhancing practices. So, do you remember I said earlier about how we're trying to think of ways to do science better? So, for example, by telling people in advance what kind of statistical analysis we're going to do. So that's exactly what it means. They are examining whether these rigor-enhancing practices, like pre-registration, have an effect on replicability and effect sizes. Okay. For laboratories in conducting discovery-orientated social behavioural research participated in a prospective replication study, over 5 years the labs conducted their typical research, examining topics covering psychology, marketing, advertising, political science, communication, and judgment and decision-making. So this wasn't just psychologists. A lot of the things that I've talked about so far and that they're talking about in this paper, they're not just issues in psychology. They are issues across all of the social sciences. So yeah, everything from marketing to political science, to judgment and decision-making, so understanding how people think about things. I think they are also a problem in economics a little bit, but not as much, because economics is a little bit more mathsy and they use big samples by default. So they tend to do like kind of countrywide analyses, more focused on the economy. Shock and horror. Economics focuses on the economy. I can't believe it. Okay. So, um, each lab engaged in a pilot testing of new effects based on their laboratory's business as usual practices. These could involve collecting data with different sample providers and with any sample size the lab saw fit. All pilots were required to have their materials, procedure, hypothesis, analysis plan, and exclusions pre-registered prior to data collection. Ostensible discoveries were then nominated for confirmation and replication by the discovering labs. The main criterion for moving from piloting and exploration into confirmation and replication protocol was that the lab believed that they had discovered a new effect that was statistically distinguishable from zero during their piloting phase. So in short, they're basically just they're taking their kind of initial ideas. So a pilot test is basically when you have this idea for a study, but you're not entirely sure it's going to do what you think. So you take it away, you run it with like a smaller group of people. It depends on the study. It might be, like 20 to 50. It might be a few hundred if you're trying to do a large scale study. The whole point is to test whether what you're doing is actually going to work, or whether there's any changes that you need to make to ensure that it's actually doing what we think it should do. So the idea here is that they're doing these pilot testing like as a collective, right? They're kind of a big group of labs. They're all coming together. They're reporting the pilot testing ideas that seem to actually do something, and then they are taking those ideas and doing a bigger confirmatory test. It's trying to make sure that the replication is actually worth doing, that it's actually worth doing the study with a big sample, and then whether we actually find it when we do. So from just reading this initially, this seems like a really cool idea, because one of the big problems that we have in social sciences generally is that we don't really get that much money. We don't get much money to conduct our research, which we do need. It's not ideal trying to run an experiment. Say, for example, you're bringing people into the lab and they have to sit down and do like a 2.5 hour study where they're just sitting and pressing buttons on a keyboard. And then you turn around to them at the end and you're like, okay, thanks for taking part. And that's it. You don't get anything from it apart from like the satisfaction of helping science, I guess. But it's a lot of people's time and a lot of people's energy and effort. So yeah, we should really be compensating them. Unfortunately, unfortunately not. Yeah, I wish that we did actually get a decent amount of money. It would be nice to be able to actually run the studies that I want to run. But furious button mashing, all done. You know what? I think I would be ready for that study. Like I've had a lot of practice furiously attacking the droids. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Honestly, like a big chunk of psychology studies is just doing very strange things in a lab, like repetitive behaviors or moving chairs or talking to somebody that isn't really a participant. They're a psychologist just vibing and trying to make you think they're one. I volunteered to help in your research. Thank you. If I ever do any research that I can share, I will actually. But obviously it involves. But there's normally like specific things I have to do, and it's normally a survey that's targeting specific types of people. So very sadly, I don't think I will be able to share my actual research. I'm also finishing soon, to be fair. Like my PhD it's meant to be over in April, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think the design of psychological studies is quite interesting. It's quite complex compared to doing like a chemistry test. Yeah, in all honesty, I think we don't get enough credit, to be honest. I really think we don't get enough credit. Because there is, like, I know that, say for example, chemistry and physics, you're working in complicated systems, but the amount of randomness and degrees of freedom when you're working with people, it's wild. Like, you have to think about so many things. And I think that, yeah, we should be given a little bit of credit for the things we have to think about, I do surveys for my friend sometimes because she also does psychology. Good. Well done. Help your friend. That's great. Honestly, the struggle is so real, especially for like students that are earlier in their psychology career. If you're an undergrad, like doing a bachelor's degree in psychology, finding people to do your research is such a pain. And often you have to do maybe like 3 or 4 studies over the course of a year, and the university won't necessarily help you recruit people to take part in it, which isn't the best. Yeah, it's quite painful, and eventually by the end of the degree everyone starts being like, oh, why are you asking me to take part in another survey? Like, what is wrong with you? I am done with your surveys. And then you just don't, like, you do this, at least in the UK, you do this massive research project at the end of your degree. And yeah, by the time I got to my research project at the end of my degree, nobody wanted to do my studies anymore. So yeah, my bachelor's thesis was just entirely based around Facebook groups. And then my master's one was even worse because, like, by that point, everyone was like, you've been doing this for 5 years and you are still trying to get us to take part in your studies. And yeah, my master's thesis was on a slightly more controversial topic, so people didn't want to do it. Yeah, it was painful, but you know, it's for the greater good. Good way to think about it. You're helping science. Okay, so I've had some more tea. My throat is starting to hurt a little bit, actually. So I might, we might have to. There's like a bit of a running joke among pretty much every psychologist that I've ever met, actually, every research psychologist anyway, which is that we read bits of the introduction and then we just skip down to the discussion, and then maybe we look at the methods and results if we need to. But yeah, I think that's part of the reason why we keep replicating or trying to build on studies that aren't very good, to be honest, is because we're not actually reading the maths. I think I might choose a slightly less mathsy paper next time so that we all know what's going on. Why a running joke? Why not a jogging joke? This is a good question. Why is it called a running joke? Why is it running? I don't like running. I'm not very good at running, and I would prefer it to be a walking or preferably a sitting joke. Thank you. Okay, right. So in the self-confirmatory, back to the paper. Sorry, I just started reading and then didn't say. Back to who is it running from? Oh no. Yeah, I mean, I'm not running from anything. I'm not running from anything. Let's put it that way. Oh, I get out of breath just thinking. True gamer hours. I'm new to psychology, and this seems like a national exam type of paper, or maybe it's easy. I don't know. You know what? This is definitely, I think this is aimed at scientists who are in a very specific niche of psychology, to be fair. I kind of just chose it because it seemed interesting and it was from Nature, so I figured people are going to be talking about it. But yeah, I think this is probably aimed more at people that they're involved in trying to make psychology work a bit better. So yeah, next time I'll choose a slightly more beginner friendly paper, because I've really just thrown you into the deep end. Like, this is not what you signed up for. I have no idea what's going on, but I love it. You know what? Same. I also have no idea what's going on. Okay, right. The paper. So each of the 4 labs submitted 4 new candidate discoveries for a self-confirmatory test and 4 replications, for a total of 16 confirmatory tests and 64 replications. So what they're doing there is the pilot studies that they've ran, they found some cool effects out of it. And then the study that did the pilot, oh my gosh, my brain. The lab, that's the word. Oh my gosh. I'm having some real 404 moments today. What is going on? I need more caffeine, but I can't have more caffeine because it's late. So, official psychology fact, try not to have too much caffeine after like 2 p.m. because it does actually mess with your sleep cycle. Okay, right, anyway. So what was happening here is that the labs, they've all done their pilot testing, They are running their nice little introductory study to see whether there's an effect size that they want to check, and then they are replicating it themselves. So the first lab has done a small test, and then they've done a big test, and then they give it to 4 other labs. So 4 groups of scientists that, then they're doing their own thing. They're nothing to do with the original lab. And then those labs repeat it in exactly the same way that they did it. So it ends up that there are a series of pilot discoveries, and then all of them are replicated at least once, and then if there is still an effect being found, they are repeating them again to make sure that they are actually an effect worth studying in the future. Okay. So, oh yes, and they used a large sample. So remember I said earlier that it's important to have a big sample. So that just means a big group of people that you're doing your research on, so that you can start to see whether it's something that you might expect to see on a big scale across the whole population. New to psychology is a stretch. I just signed up for the learning. Well, I think that means, I think to be honest, I think that every stage of your learning, you're probably going to feel like a beginner to some extent. I thought I knew everything about psychology when I finished high school, and I had got my little, high school qualification in psychology, and I went to university. And to be fair, the first year of my bachelor's degree was largely the same. But yeah, it turns out that when you move into your second year of your bachelor's, things get pretty intense, and you learn that a lot of things you thought you knew are actually wrong. And then you go into your third year, and then you start learning very specific things in very niche modules, and then you realize that all of the things that you thought from your general modules in second and first year are wrong. And then you do a master's, and you're like, wow, everything I ever knew was just incorrect. And then you get to PhD, and then the thing about doing a PhD is that you know a lot of things about a very, very specific thing. So if you ask me a kind of general psychology question, I can give you a rough answer most of the time. But really everything that I know it's not even in one specific field. It's in one specific topic within a specific field. I know everything about, well, not everything, obviously. I know everything about my specific niche within my specific topic within my specific field, which happens to be in psychology. Yeah. I just like listening to people talk about science. I'm an infosec engineer by trade, but largely align my methods with the scientific method. You know what? That's great. I love that. I think that makes so much sense. There's loads of places where that makes total sense, to just apply the scientific method in different places. Oh, thank you for the follow, Lord to Basil. Thank you. I hope you're enjoying the stream. Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's loads of places just in day-to-day life where the scientific method can be really, really helpful. So yeah, that sounds great. And actually, from what I don't know much about infosec engineering, but from what I do know about infosec engineering, there's a fair bit of psychology that would come in, right? Because as infosec is in information security, right? So from what I understand, the majority of things that go wrong in security is just people people being people doing things that they aren't meant to be doing. So yeah, welcome aboard. Thank you for sharing, and I hope that you can actually get something useful out of this, even if it's just starting to see how the scientific method applies towards people. You're old. I'm in high school. Hey, we were all in high school once. I was in high school 10 years ago. That's not that long. Well, when you get older, it feels not that long. You know everything. I don't know anything. I know exactly 3 things. I know about anime. I know about a very specific topic in social psychology. And I know about... You know what? I think that might be it. Yeah, I got nothing. keyword was. Oh, well, I mean, you were in primary school once, I guess. That doesn't make you old. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be quite upsetting for me in like a year or so when I'm like, oh yeah, I was at university. I was doing a doctorate. Yeah, maybe I should change my Twitch name to Dr. Psydere when I actually get it, but we'll see, we'll see. We were all born once too, honestly. We were. Although, were we? Maybe not all of us were born. Maybe some of us were just rendered. Who knows? Anyway. Right, shall we get back to the paper? Class, you're being very, very terrible at staying on topic today. I'm very disappointed. This is absolutely nothing to do with the quality of my teaching, I'll have you know. Okay. Yeah, you will be sorry. Okay. Right. Well, gosh, where even were we? Okay, right. So they conducted the replication studies with 1,500 people. Demerit. I think that only the mods can hand out demerits. Laboratories and sample sizes. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure how to say your name. Zero Eyes, is that right? Zero Eyes? I think so. But yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Any kind of phonetic spelling. Yeah, Zero Eyes. Perfect. Okay. So laboratories and sample sizes. So yes, all of the laboratories are replicating four of the laboratories, are replicating the findings, and they're seeing if this makes it a consistent finding, and if it is maybe a way we could consider doing social science a bit better. So, regardless of the outcome of the self-confirmatory test, in the replication phase, all four labs conducted independent pre-registered replications using the written methodology and any specialised study materials shared by the discovering lab, for example, videos constructed for delivering interventions. So yeah, whether the replication that the first lab did found an effect size that matched the pilot or not, they still just ran it again just to make sure. Because sometimes you can actually find things that don't really exist, but you can also not find things that do exist. And again, that is just a function of randomness. It's just things are random. Okay, so ordinarily, we would promote strong communication between labs to maximise sharing of tacit knowledge about the methodology, but in this case, to maintain the independence of each replication, we opted to discourage communication with the discovering lab outside of the documented protocols, except for critical methodology clarifications. So, that means that normally collaborating, so, all the scientists coming together and working on the same thing, we love that, we support it. It makes science more effective and better. But in this case, we are testing whether the changes to the scientific process, such as pre-registration, actually end up creating better results. So because of that, we can't be having people collaborating through back channels. We can't let people talk. We can't let them share things about the studies that might have an impact on the way that the replicators are conducting the research. So remember I said earlier about moderating variables? This is an example of a potentially moderating variable. If there is a bunch of these replications happening where people are talking about it and they're sharing their knowledge about how to do the study, and then there's a bunch of them where they're not, then that means that you're going to get probably quite different results across each. So you need to make sure that nobody's talking. We need to control for it. That's the word. We're controlling it. It's a variable that we are controlling. It means that we're not letting it change because it could affect the results if it does. Okay. The replicating labs used equally large sample sizes, and each lab used a different sample provider. So yeah, they're all conducting the studies with the same large 1,500 people. group of people, but they're all using a different service to recruit their participants. So remember when I said that we need money in order to do the best science? That's what they mean. They are using some kind of service that pays people for taking part in the research. And each one is using a different one. And I think the idea there is that if there's any differences between them, they'll kind of even out because everybody's replicating multiple studies. So pre-registration, reporting all outcomes, large sample sizes, transparent archiving, sharing of materials, and commitment to high-fidelity replication procedures should minimize irreplicability or declining effect sizes stemming from questionable research practices, selective reporting, low-powered research, or poorly implemented replication procedures. So I think we've covered what all of those words mean. So I am once again asking for your financial support. Honestly, it's actually so sad the amount of times that I have gone begging to my department, like, please, I need to run one more study, please, just give me a few £100, please. I'm begging you. Honestly, it's yeah, I'm selling my soul for this degree. Okay. So, in theory, all of these changes to the scientific method should mean that we are replicating things consistently. So the irreplicability, so that just means inability to replicate findings, to find them again and again, and declining effect sizes. So remember, the effect size is getting smaller each time you test it. It means that it should, in theory, according to what we know about the scientific method, hopefully mean that we're finding things more consistently. Question: in psychology, if you make the sample size quite large, are we risking introducing groupthink into the experiment, like the results being skewed by the participants being aware that the study is large? So that's a really interesting point, because I know that there is a lot of research coming out around this phenomenon called the wisdom of the crowd. So wisdom of the crowd is this idea that if you get lots of people together and they kind of estimate something, they kind of make their best guess about how likely something is to happen, you get much more consistent and accurate results than you do if you just have a few people, or even people that are experts in the thing that they're meant to be guessing. So because that's becoming more common knowledge, in theory, that could become a thing that influences the experiment. So what you're saying there about participants knowing what the study is doing, and then that, or something about the study, and then that influencing how they behave, is called a demand effect. And it's something that we have to think about really, really carefully in psychology. I think that's actually a thing that I have never seen mentioned before. So, but yeah, so you might have actually just come up with your own unique experiment there. So you definitely have another career ahead of you in psychology if you ever want to swap out of InfoSec. But yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think there is a chance it could happen. But I also think that if there were any evidence to suggest it was likely to happen, we would probably just not tell people how many we're aiming to recruit into the experiment. Because we can. So I think I've mentioned in a previous stream, but when you're working with people, you've got to stick by some really, really strict ethical rules. And that means that for the most part, you have to be really upfront about what you're doing with them. But you can hide certain things from your participants as long as you are upfront with them at the end. You tell them everything that you did, and you tell them exactly why, and you give them the chance to remove their data from the study if they get to the end and they're like, nah, this isn't, I'm not about this. This was sus. I am not about this. So yeah, if you give them the chance to kind of opt out and remove their data at the end, then you can hide it from them. I think that actually a lot of the time psychology experiments don't tell people how many participants they're recruiting anyway. I think it's possibly one of those things that people just leave off occasionally. Because there's not really an immediately apparent reason why a participant would need to know that, aside from just curiosity or just kind of knowing how many people their data is going to be surrounded by, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. Hundreds of pounds too. I had no idea psychology experiments are this costly. Yeah, I mean, it's because it's people, right? So well, in theory, I should have an ethical obligation to pay people appropriately for their time. I think, to be honest, it's one of those ethical points that tends to be how can I say this? Not ignored. Um, maybe just kind of. I don't know, just ignored. We just ignore it. There's no other way around it. Uh, we just sometimes we just don't pay people for their time, especially students. I don't love that. No, I don't love that either. I really don't like it. If it was up to me, we'd all be paying at least minimum wage, because I think that people's time is really, really valuable. And I think that also a big one of the issues that might lead to our replication crisis in psychology, so this thing where our results aren't being replicated properly, is the fact that we do most of our experiments on psychology students because they're easy to recruit into our studies because they're right there. So yeah, we tend to just kind of give them course credits, which I think is a little bit it's kind of coercing them into it, to be honest. It's kind of saying, like, if you want to finish your degree, you kind of have to take part in this, which I'm not keen on. Yeah, if I had the funds, I would be paying people minimum wage at least, probably more, because I think people's time and brain power is very, very important, and we should be respecting it. But unfortunately, I do not live in a world where I have money for my experiments. So I have to maybe do a raffle for vouchers or something. Can I pay for an experiment in Greg's vouchers? Actually, yes, you can. One of my studies is giving away like a £25 voucher for a winner or something like that. Big source of potential biases there. Yeah, absolutely. It really, really is, because it basically it's people largely that can take part in research for fun, or like they have the time. So that means that it's normally well educated and fairly well off financially. Yeah. Whereas people maybe from a less from like a lower socioeconomic status. That's the word that we use in psychology to basically mean people with less money. But yeah, people from a lower socioeconomic status background, or people who don't trust in scientists for whatever reason. We don't necessarily have the best track record. There's a mad scientist stereotype for a reason. But yeah, it means that a lot of people just don't end up taking part, and it means that we can't say that our findings are necessarily generalizable, which means we can't say that they apply to all groups equally. I suppose somebody could do a study of participants' willingness to engage in studies based on compensation. I think that has actually been done. I think I remember an economics paper about that. But I couldn't tell you who did it, or when it was published, or what the name was. I just vaguely have a small nugget in my brain telling me that was already a thing. Raffle for vouchers. Yeah, honestly, that's literally it. Like, that's what I have to work with. Like, I think for each year of my PhD, I get about £1,200, which sounds like a lot. So that's just for my research costs. I get like a stipend as well, which is unfortunately below minimum wage. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, I get about £1,200 to help me per year with my research costs, and those They barely cover system licensing costs. Yeah, for real. So that 1,200 has to cover my travel to conferences, because as a scientist, we're meant to take our findings and then show them to the big wide world and say, hey, look, I've done this cool, funky stuff. Other scientists, pay attention to me. Look at what I'm doing. But they are very expensive. I think I went to one last year and, oh wait, no, this year. We're still in 2023. I went to one this year, and I think the registration cost alone was about £300, and then I had to travel there also and get accommodation, and that was another 500-ish. So yeah, that's 800 of my 1,200. So yeah, 2/3 of my money gone, and then I also have to use it to buy books. I have to use it to buy equipment that I might need. I have to use it to buy services that I might need. So, for example, the participants, and, software and stuff like that. That's a lot of, yeah, it is. It is a lot of dosh. It's a lot of money. Things really add up. What they don't tell you about the additional costs when you start necessarily. Actually, I think most universities now have a little disclaimer at the bottom of their PhD program thing saying, "Oh yes, you may have to pay extra things in addition to your tuition fees." But yeah. By the way, my tuition fees are covered by my studentship. So a studentship is just what they give what they give you to cover your living costs allegedly. And your research costs. But yeah, my studentship is coming to an end soon, which is why I'm doing more teaching, both virtually and also in person. So for those of you that are new to the stream, there's been a bit of a running thing for the past the whole time I've been streaming the last 2 weeks, where I'm battling a massive pile of marking assignments, as in I'm marking undergraduate student assignments, and it's I want to give really good feedback, but it's so hard. It's so hard to give good feedback and to make it worth it and feel like I'm doing a good job as an educator, because I don't necessarily get given the time to do the best I can, and I hate that. I wish I was doing better for my students in that sense. But anyway, enough of being a downer. Enough of that. The academic ecosystem is unfortunately quite. I would use the word exploitative. It's a bit sus. But it is what it is. You've got to navigate it to some extent to get that doctorate so people take you seriously. Yeah. You'll get there. Thank you. I hope so. Oh dear God, I hope so. Yeah. So how much of this introduction have we got left? Okay, we're close. Okay, right. So we've got through that bit. If despite these rigor enhancing practices, low replicability rates or declining effect sizes are observed, such rates or declines could be intrinsic to social behavioral scientific investigation. So this is basically just saying, if we're trying all of these new ways of doing science that are better in theory, and the results we're getting still don't replicate, then we need to seriously consider whether social behavioral scientific investigation, so basically just social sciences, psychology, political science, all of those fields, we just need to consider whether they're a bit rubbish. We just need to think about whether we could just, we might need to just rethink the whole thing. But as we know from the abstract, things are a little bit more positive than that. And things do seem to be okay if you've got a good system in place. So that's really good. Just try your best. I believe in you. Thank you. I'm trying my best. I'm trying. So to be honest, a part of doing these streams is to just kind of keep my motivation to keep doing the PhD and finish it off and teach in a way that I feel comfortable with. Because I'm not super, it's not confidence. I'm just not very good at connecting with students in person because I don't know what we've got in common. It's quite difficult to start those conversations when you're in a massive class of like, I think in my class there's like 90 people and there's 3 of us teaching. So there's like a lecturer and then me and another PhD student that are supporting the class. So yeah, it's a bit painful. You can't really strike up a proper conversation and you've only got 2 hours and a fair chunk of that is the lecturer lecturing. So yeah. You'd be a better teacher than any of my current ones. Oh, I hope so. Well, no, I don't hope so. I hope they're good teachers. Sometimes when you're sat in class and they're just talking, it's really easy to just zone out. I think that for me, the best teachers I had were the ones that were just like a bit more personal and shared things that they cared about. So yeah, hopefully I can teach things in a way that's actually interesting. The world definitely needs more psychologists, that's for sure. Also, one area we can't really automate in AI yet. Yeah, to be honest, I think that so in the UK at least, psychology is like the most popular degree now, but a lot of the psychology that we're teaching is still based around the type of science that isn't super replicable. It's not super robust. It's not necessarily following the scientific method really well. It's more just like fuck around, find out. But yeah, I think I agree. I think that, you know, I mean, obviously I'm biased. I'm like massively biased, so probably don't listen to me on this. But yeah, I think psychology is really important. You know, it's the way that we can study people in a kind of systematic way. And, you know, that means that we can learn some things that just naturally observing wouldn't necessarily teach us. We're really prone to just seeing other people through certain lenses and taking mental shortcuts that process things in just slightly the wrong way. It's kind of like you know, if you put the wrong kind of data through a specific algorithm, it just kind of ends up coming out wrong. Like if the data isn't suited to your algorithm, there's no point doing it. And I think that that's probably a bit of what's going on with people. We've got our algorithms that work in day-to-day life, but they don't necessarily work at scale. That's where psychology comes in. But yeah, also we can't really automate it in AI yet. We'll probably get there at some point. I know that there is a lot of people working on the kind of like a psychology applications of AI. So especially in like health type of psychology, so like diagnosis and looking at brain scans and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe we'll get there one day. But I think that I think it's just going to end up being like we need people and AI regardless. So 300 each. Yeah. So we have, I think about 300 people. Well, it might be a bit less than that this year. It was 300 last year. But I think this year it's more like 250 people in our first year psychology bachelor's cohort, which is a bit intense. But yeah, it means that you can't necessarily give everybody the time, which is sad. I'd love to have you as a psychology teacher. The one at my high school is a little lame. Yeah. You know what? I would love to be a teacher. I don't think it suits me in real life very well though. But I'm hoping that I can produce enough content that people can maybe use my backlog as like a revision tool. That would be the dream, is to just teach good psychology online in a way that they can actually learn how to do psychology properly. Yeah, but also, to be fair, I am terminally online, so that's probably why I seem a bit more relatable than the average teacher. Your bias proceeds to listen harder. Yes, I'm biased in favor of psychology, and also probably biased in terms of my anime preferences. Maybe one day I'll actually end up talking about what anime I like. That should be a topic for a Just Chatting stream at some point, really, shouldn't it? Yeah. AI is really bad at medical diagnosis right now. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. I know that there's a whole bunch of people working on things like trying to produce like new DNA sequences using diffusion and stuff like that, which is cool. It's kind of sus. It's just giving more more fuel for our AI overlords in the future, really, isn't it? I, for one, think that Neurosama should just take over the world. I think it would be fine. I think we'd do great. Yeah. I highly doubt we'll see AI on humanities fields anytime soon. Yeah, I think it's definitely harder to do because, well, especially humanities in the sense of like kind of based especially humanities in terms of the humanities that are more focused around kind of interpreting things through a certain theoretical lens. So there's a lot of humanities that's just like, oh, okay, here is a phenomena, and then here is how I see it according to this framework of understanding the world. So this kind of like set of ideas about how the world works, I'm going to look at this thing and see how those ideas apply to it. Yeah, so I think that is definitely not going to happen. Personally, I take psychology to be a science. We use the scientific method. But even psychology is going to be super hard to automate in any way. Yeah, I think that psychology could probably do a lot more. We could make a lot more use out of like pipelines for data and stuff like that. But yeah, trying to actually analyze how people behave that's not going to work. I think there's too many things, too many variables involved. Okay, right. The latest in medical AI is that MIT came up with a new type of ranged CAT scan, which shoots an imperceptible laser and measures the Doppler effect of the reverberations, and then uses a big words again, deterministic neural network to make sense of the data. I'm gonna be real, I know very little about AI. My knowledge of AI is like, ChatGPT is a large language model, and that means it has very big sets of words, and then it produces its own sets of words using the patterns that it has identified from those words. And that is the entirety. Oh, and also like I think from what I understand, diffusion technology is like you basically just generate a random set of pixels, and then you train the model by rewarding it every time that its pixels are a bit more similar to the image. So you use like statistics to see whether it's similar or not. That is the limit of my AI knowledge. I know nothing about this stuff really. And I probably should, because I think it's going to be something that we're using for our data analysis in probably not even that far off. There's already papers coming out about how to use AI as a psychologist and stuff like that, but I have not the time or maths ability to read them, unfortunately. So, yes. So, for me, I think AI will just continue to be a meme, mostly. I would just keep referencing our Lord and Savior, Neurosama, and that'll be it. I'm not even going to pretend to understand it. Yeah. Anyway, it's almost 10 o'clock where I am, and I haven't even finished the introduction. So how would we all feel about coming back to the rest of this paper another time? Because we'll finish the introduction, and then we can maybe do the methods another time. We will come back to the same paper, and we'll all keep reading through it. What do we think? What do we think of that? When do you stream? So my streams at the minute are a bit chaotic. I honestly wish I could give you a consistent answer to that, but because I'm picking up a lot of like odd teaching stuff at the minute to fund my PhD ending, and then I have to go to my actual office occasionally as well for other things like meetings. So I'm basically just streaming whenever I can, and then I've got like Christmas is coming up and stuff like that. So there's just lots of wacky stuff going on at the minute. Things are a bit chaotic. I'm hoping that in the new year, I'll be able to have a more consistent live stream schedule. But unfortunately right now, it's just a case of like, I'll put changes on Instagram and then I'll try my best. But yeah, I'll try and follow the schedule I've got in my Twitch profile, but I really can't promise it. Things are just all over the place at the minute. Not too big of an AI fan. Yeah, it's been a bit of, so my main gripe with it is that it's become a bit of an issue when I'm like dealing with student work. It's getting in the way of things because obviously I want to know what they think. I don't want to know what AI thinks. I don't want to know what ChatGPT thinks. I don't want to know what Google Bard thinks. I don't want to know what Bing thinks. I just want to know what they think. And unfortunately, yeah, it's very, you can tell when it's AI generated, to be honest, because it follows a kind of specific pattern, which isn't necessarily a pattern that you would see people writing. So yeah. But I mean, sometimes it's useful, right? Sometimes it's useful. It's about using it in a ethical and useful way. To my knowledge, I see a lot of AI used in industrial applications from resource extraction to manufacturing. It will probably continue to thrive. Yeah, I think it's really, from what I understand, it's really, really helpful for, especially like detailed, like molecular stuff, stuff that you can boil down into numbers really, really easily. The problem with people is that sometimes there's things that you can't necessarily put into numbers super easily. So in psychology, we tend to use a mixture of kind of number-based data from experiments, but we also use a bit of qualitative data, we call it. So this is things like interviewing people and seeing how they feel about a topic. And we try and like put the two bits together basically. And then also like observational data where we just see what people are doing out in the wild. We put all of these different bits together and try and form a pattern out of it. So try and see where things overlap. But yeah, it's complicated. So I think it wouldn't necessarily work very well for people. I mean, I think it will eventually, but we're probably quite far off AI being really, really useful for anything people related yet. Oh, we've got a nice explanation of neural stuff. That's not the right word. Machine learning. There we go. Yes. It's very similar to normal statistics. The best explanation I've heard is you imagine a map and the raindrops falling on that map. If we select a random point and drop a raindrop, we can measure where it will land. We can measure where it will land on the map, and 2, which direction does the raindrop move in after it hits the ground. So if we consider the speed and direction of that raindrop's movement, we can take a guess where the lowest point on the map is and try dropping a new drop there and remeasure. And those movement values are known as bias, and that's what drive the interactions between layers of the neural network. Okay, cool. Thank you, Zero Eyes. Okay, I'm trying to think off the top of my head how I can translate that into people, but I think it might just be too late in my day for me to be able to do it. Oh, so all it does is find data patterns, even if we're unaware of those patterns. Yeah, okay, cool. Hopefully, I think that's what psychology is trying to do in general. But yeah, like you said, AI or machine learning is just basically fancy statistics, right? In fact, sometimes it's not even fancy. Sometimes it's just a regression. And that's okay. That's okay. We love regressions. I'm sorry for everybody in the chat that doesn't know what a regression is. I'm so sorry. Okay, right. It is getting late. So let's see. And also, M0 needs to go and get on with the biology studies. So we'll power through this last bit really, really quickly. There's like 2 sentences left. Okay, right. So we read through this about the science maybe being bad. Okay. Yep, we've read that. So this is the last bit. Each of the 16 ostensible discoveries were obtained through pilot and exploratory research. So exploratory research is just research that's kind of like putting feelers out and seeing what new ideas there are. Oh, feelers. Why did I say that word? That's such a horrible word. Anyway, yeah. So each of the 16 ostensible discoveries were obtained through pilot and exploratory research conducted in... Gosh, it is. You can tell it's getting late. I'm losing the plot. Independently in each laboratory. Not every pilot study the labs conducted was put forward for confirming... Oh my gosh. No, we're failing. We're just, yeah, English is just not, I'm monolingual and I can't even do one. Like, oh no. Not every pilot study the labs conducted was put forward for confirmation and replication. Like all exploratory research, labs sometimes found errors, did not find signals of potential effects, or just lost interest in pursuing it further. Yeah, sometimes we start researching something and then we get bored halfway through, and that's okay. It's okay. Normalize giving up on ideas that are rubbish. The labs introduced 4 provisional discoveries each, resulting in 16 self-confirmatory tests and 64 replications, so 3 independent and 1 self-replication for each, testing the replicability and decline. All confirmatory tests, replications and analyses were pre-registered both in the individual studies and for the meta project. So that means that they did all of the fancy new science things for both the individual studies run by the labs, and then also when they were pooling everything together, because this is a paper where they're taking all of those studies and squishing them all together, they've also pre-registered what they're going to do for the big squish. Okay, right. So that is us at the end of the introduction. It is late. I am losing the plot. We will finish this paper at some point, but it won't be today. It will not be today. I need to sleep. I am on my way out, and I also have a meeting in like 10 hours, so this was a terrible decision. Why have I done this to myself? Oh dear. Yeah. You could listen to this all day. You know what? If nothing else, I hope that this is really boring and it puts you to sleep. You know, maybe this is just nice falling asleep content, because there comes a point where especially when we get to the results, there will come a point where the numbers are just numbers and we're just like, what is this? I have no idea what's going on anymore. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, this paper made me feel stupid. Did anything? No, don't feel stupid. Don't feel stupid. There's been many times where I, despite having all of the education that I allegedly have read through a paper, and then I'm like, what is this? I do not understand what has just happened. I am scared and I want to go home, and then I have to read it again, and then I have to read it again, and that's okay. Yeah, like Zero Eyes said, nobody can know everything. Exactly. Yeah, you need to be aware that sometimes it's okay to just not get it. You can get it the next time. But also, to be fair, I haven't done my introductory lectures yet, and this was definitely a much heavier paper than I thought it was going to be based on the abstract. So, yikes. There was an attempt. Okay. Thanks for the stream. It was good to find you. Thank you for joining us, Lord to Basil. Thank you. Please get some rest. Thank you, Zero Eyes. I definitely will. I am going to sleep. My brain is going to shut down. I have put myself to sleep with my own reading. This is informative and educational. I'm so glad. I'm trying my best. I'm glad it was a good attempt. Thank you, everybody. Let me see if there's anybody I can raid. Who is online who I could raid? So one of my I know somebody who's playing Alien Isolation. Do we want to watch some Alien Isolation, or should we just go to bed? Maybe we should just go to bed today. Maybe we should just go to bed. Okay. I think it's time for bed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Bye.